He was born in a room so small, 2 families had to share it. No running water, no heating beyond a single coal fire. A child who had never owned a book, never slept in a bed that was fully his, never gone a single winter without hunger clawing at his ribs. And yet, this boy, this penniless Scottish kid who crossed the Atlantic with nothing but a terrified mother and a broken father, would one day sit across a table from the most powerful banker in American history and sell him an empire for a number so large it represented 4% of the entire United States economy. And then, and this is where the story gets truly insane, he would give nearly all of it away. This is the story of Andrew Carnegie. And I promise you, by the time this video ends, you will never look at money, power, or legacy the same way again. Let's go back. November 25th, 1835. Dunfermline, Scotland. Carnegie's father, William, was a handloom weaver, a proud man, a political man, a man who believed in workers' rights and the dignity of honest labor. And for a while, life was manageable. Then the power loom arrived. One machine replaced dozens of men overnight. William Carnegie watched his entire profession evaporate in front of his eyes. He tried to adapt. He couldn't. The family sank. Andrew's mother, Margaret, a fierce, iron-willed woman who would later become the most important person in Carnegie's entire life, started sewing shoes and running a tiny candy shop just to keep the family from starving. Young Andrew watched all of this. He was 10 years old, and he never forgot it. By 1848, the family had no options left. They borrowed money from relatives and boarded a ship to America. Carnegie was 13. He spoke no American English, owned nothing, knew no one outside of a small Scottish immigrant community in Allegheny, Pennsylvania, which was essentially the poor cousin of Pittsburgh. His first job? A cotton mill. 12 hours a day. 6 days a week. $1.20 per week. $1.20. He changed thread spools on spinning machines for 12 hours straight, while other boys his age in wealthy homes were learning piano and reading Shakespeare. But here's the thing. Carnegie wasn't bitter. He was watching. He was learning. He was storing every single observation like ammunition. Then came the moment that changed everything. A job opened up as a telegraph messenger boy. Carnegie jumped at it. And what he did next is where you start to understand the terrifying levels of discipline inside this kid. While other messengers delivered their telegrams and left, Carnegie memorized Pittsburgh. Every street, every building, every face of every powerful businessman in the city. He didn't just learn the job, he mastered it so completely that within a year he could read telegraph signals by sound alone without even looking at the machine. His boss was stunned. He was promoted to full telegraph operator at 14. 14 years old. But the real weapon Carnegie was secretly building wasn't his speed. It was his network. In 1853, at just 18 years of age, Carnegie landed a job as personal secretary and telegraph operator to Thomas Scott, the superintendent of the Pennsylvania Railroad, one of the most powerful men in America. And Carnegie didn't just work for Scott. He became indispensable to him. He studied how Scott thought, how Scott negotiated, how Scott moved money. He absorbed management strategy the way other people absorbed oxygen. And when Scott needed someone to run the Western Division of the Pennsylvania Railroad, he chose Carnegie. Carnegie was 24 years old and was now running one of the most critical rail divisions in the country. But it's what Carnegie did on the side that made him filthy rich. With Scott's guidance, Carnegie began investing. His very first investment, 10 shares in Adams Express Company, required his mother to mortgage the family home to raise the $500 needed. Carnegie was terrified. Then the first dividend check arrived. He held that paper check in his hands and he said, "And I need you to feel the weight of this moment." He said, "Here is the goose that lays the golden eggs." He had just discovered the single most powerful force in capitalism: money making money while you sleep. From that moment forward, Carnegie invested with obsessive precision. A sleeping car company. an oil field in Pennsylvania. That oil field alone paid him over $1 million in a single year. He was 29 years old. But Carnegie wasn't satisfied. He could see the future clearer than almost anyone alive, and the future was steel. After the Civil War, where Carnegie had served as superintendent of military railways under Scott and literally helped keep Union supply lines functioning, he made the pivot that would define history. He bet everything on steel. Not iron, steel. And he bet on a new British technology called the Bessemer process, a method that could turn raw pig iron into high-grade steel in minutes instead of days. While competitors hesitated, Carnegie built. And he didn't just build a steel mill. He built a system. Here's the move that separated Carnegie from every other industrialist alive: vertical integration. He didn't just make steel. He owned the iron ore mines. He owned the coal fields. He controlled the coke, which is the fuel that powers steel furnaces. He owned the ships that moved raw materials across the Great Lakes. He owned the railroads that carried finished steel to customers. From the ground to the customer's door, Carnegie controlled every single step. This was revolutionary. While competitors were at the mercy of suppliers and freight companies, Carnegie had eliminated them entirely. Every cost his rivals paid, Carnegie pocketed as profit. And his internal motto, hammered into every manager, every foreman, every accountant in every one of his plants, was brutal in its simplicity. Watch the costs and the profits will take care of themselves. His plants ran 24 hours a day. His workers were pushed to the absolute limit of human endurance. And Carnegie watched every penny with the obsession of a man who had once been terrified of poverty. He hired chemists, actual scientists, to analyze his steel and optimize his furnaces when almost no other industrialist thought science had any place on a factory floor. When he discovered that one of his furnaces was operating inefficiently and a competitor had switched to a superior open hearth method, he didn't wait. He ripped out the old furnaces and rebuilt, even when it cost millions, because he understood something most businessmen never do. The most expensive thing in the world is falling behind. By 1889, the United States had surpassed Great Britain as the world's largest steel producer. Andrew Carnegie was the reason. And his company was printing money on a scale that seemed almost fictional. But then came the event that tore his reputation in half. The summer of 1892, the Homestead Strike. Carnegie had spent years publicly championing workers' rights. He had written essays defending unions. He had positioned himself as a different kind of industrialist, a fair one, a humane one. But when his manager, Henry Clay Frick, slashed wages at the Homestead plant and the union refused to accept it, Carnegie, conveniently on vacation in Scotland, let Frick handle it. Frick hired 300 armed Pinkerton detectives and tried to float them down the Monongahela River onto the plant grounds. The workers had been warned. They were waiting. What followed was an open battle. Gunfire. Explosions. 10 people dead. Dozens wounded. The Pennsylvania governor sent in 8,000 militia troops. The Union was crushed. Carnegie, reading about it from his Scottish castle, sent Frick a letter of private congratulations. He had destroyed everything he publicly claimed to believe in one summer. Workers across America never forgot it. Carnegie never fully recovered from it either. But what happened next is the part that makes this story genuinely extraordinary. Because in 1901, when J.P. Morgan, the most powerful banker on earth, came to Carnegie and offered to buy his entire empire, Carnegie wrote a number on a piece of paper and handed it across the table. $480 million. Morgan looked at it, paused, and said, and these words still echo through financial history, "I want to congratulate you on being the richest man in the world." Carnegie's personal share was roughly $225 million, and what he did with it next shocked everyone. He gave it away. All of it, almost every single dollar. He had written an essay in 1889 called The Gospel of Wealth, and in it he had declared, with the absolute conviction of a man who had clawed his way from nothing, the man who dies rich dies disgraced. He believed that great wealth was a public trust, that a man who accumulated a fortune had a moral obligation to return it to the society that made it possible. And Carnegie didn't just write about it, he lived it with the same ferocious intensity he brought to building steel mills. He funded 2,500 public libraries across the English-speaking world. Every town that asked, every community that pledged to maintain it, got a Carnegie library. He endowed Carnegie Hall in New York City. He created the Carnegie Corporation, the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, the Carnegie Institution for Science, Carnegie Mellon University. He funded church organs, supported Tuskegee Institute, built university buildings, funded scientific research. He gave away $350 million. In today's money, somewhere between $7 and $10 billion. Gone. By choice. On August 11, 1919, Andrew Carnegie died in his Massachusetts estate. He was 83 years old. He was buried in Sleepy Hollow Cemetery in New York, with a simple Scottish stone from his beloved Skibo Castle marking his grave. Not a monument, not a mausoleum, a stone. The man who had once owned 4% of the American economy chose to be remembered with a rock. And here is the question that his life leaves permanently burning in your mind. Was Andrew Carnegie a hero or a villain? Was he the self-made immigrant who proved that anyone can rise from nothing? Or was he a ruthless machine who crushed workers, manipulated politicians, and then tried to buy his way into history with a checkbook? The answer, and this is the uncomfortable truth, is that he was both. Completely, undeniably, simultaneously both. And maybe that's the most honest thing anyone can say about power, wealth, and what human beings do with them. The boy born in a one-room Scottish cottage didn't just build a steel empire. He forced an entire civilization to ask itself a question it's still asking today. How much is enough? And what do you owe the world that made you?